All right, I'm going to try some new experiment with streaming to multiple places through Restream today, so we'll see how this one works. Today I want to talk about an element of search, and that is jumping to different locations. So, imagine that your cursor is here and you want to jump to one of these places, preferably without using your mouse and without, too many things that you have to type. And so there's a lot of ways to do that, and I'm going to go over a bunch of them that I've kind of built into scimax or that are built into Emacs that help you do this. This is kind of an expert level hack or tweak to being able to do things efficiently where you don't have to take too much time to get where you want. All right, so what kinds of things am I talking about? Let's say my cursor is like in the middle here, and you want to go to the beginning of the buffer or the end of the buffer. There's some commands, keyboard commands like Control Shift left arrow, Control Alt arrow, not arrow, less than. So if you're looking at your keyboard, it's like Shift Alt comma or Shift Alt period will jump you to the beginning and end of the buffer. You might be interested in being at the beginning of the line, and then Control A or Control E will move you to the beginning of the line. If you want to get to a specific line, there's a couple ways to do this. I think I usually do Escape G, and then it will ask me for a line number. That's not super helpful unless you know what line you're on. And let's see, I think down here this is saying we're on line 10, so let's go to line 12. But that moves us there. Oh, no, it doesn't do that at all. All right, we'll see why I don't use that particular line there. But after that, it gets a little bit inconvenient to remember, and there might not even be convenient key bindings. Say I want to jump to a word or a sentence or a paragraph or a link or a heading or a symbol, a buffer, a window, maybe a recent file. These are all things you might want to jump to conveniently. And more generally in org, you might want to jump to an agenda heading or jump to a visible block or a visible headline, something in different scopes. And all of these are things that we'll kind of look at. So the main entry point to learn all these things for me is a Hydra. So in scimax, this is the overall Hydra menu that I have and that I use, and you can see over here J is for jump. So if I just press F12J, or I mapped F12 to caps lock, so I do caps lock J, then I get another Hydra, and now you can see all of the options that we have. So we can jump to the beginning of a buffer, and let me narrow back down to this one. We can jump to the end of a buffer, beginning of a line, end of a line. We can go to a line that's the same one as before. I don't find that one too helpful. And then there's another one here for line. So if I press L here, then we get yet another Hydra, and we can jump to a line above the current position, below the current position, but normally I just press L, and this will open an AV selector. So AV is a tree-like selector that now this shows me to anything I type here will jump to one of these lines. So let's say I want to go here, then we type L, and that narrows it down, and then I type G, and we get right to it. So that's pretty helpful. Let's go back to here. Let's say I want to jump to a word, then I press W, and there's a whole bunch of ways to jump to words, it turns out. So the default is to press WW, and that will jump to something that's called word 1. But you can also jump to a word in the line, a word above the line, a word below the line, and there's all these variations. So let me just press W again. All right, that's surprising. Okay, that's better. And now it'll prompt me to start typing a word. So let's say I want to jump to, let's do head, H-E. These are now A, S, and D are the only things that start out with with those, and if I press A, it will jump to that particular one. All right, so like in real time, it would be caps lock JWW, press D, and there's only one word that starts with D, and it jumps right to it. So let's do it again, AJWW, let's do I. These are all the words that start with I, and if you're looking at the word you want, let's say I'm looking at inline, then I just press A to get there. All right, so that's pretty helpful. You can jump to characters, words, sentences, paragraphs. Let's look at sentences and paragraphs. Let me insert some text. So here we have a bunch of sentences. So here if I do, let's jump now to sentences. So this now goes through and recognizes the beginning of every sentence. So let's say I want to jump to this one. We just do LD and carry on with whatever we were interested in. And then if we want to see paragraphs, then it finds what Emacs considers the beginning of paragraphs. So obviously it's the beginning of this paragraph, but these are also recognized as paragraphs. All right, let's see, what else do we have? You could jump to a window. So let's split this window a couple of different ways and see what happens here. So now if I press N over here for Ace window, then it gives me in the upper right hand corner 1, 2, and 3. And if I press 3, we'll jump over to this window. And this works for as many windows as you have. So now we can jump to any one of them that we want. And that's sometimes more convenient than like trying to do this manually, like Control X other, Control X other. I never remember how to go backwards and end up cycling through them all. Let's see, how about buffers? So here if I press jump and press B for buffers, then I get a list of all the buffers, so it's pretty easy to jump to any particular one. And similarly, we can go to our recent files, and this is just console recent F or something like that, so there's nothing stopping you from using those other than if you get used to this F12 jump idea, then you can get to all of these different things. All right, let's look at the org menu real quick. So I talked about orgdb before. So H will just open orgdb for the searching a heading in the database. D will just give you the Hydra that I talked about. K will jump to a link. So let's see, do we have any links in here? Yeah, so H, J, or K, jump. It looks like this is not considered a link as far as that's concerned, which seems a little bit weird. Maybe we'll look at it and see why. Let's put in some subheadings. Sub 1, sub 2, and now let's jump here and let's press O. That gets me to another special Hydra menu for org mode, and now I could say press V. Okay, another thing we'll have to look at. Let's try H. This will show me all of the entries in this particular org document. So let's say I pick sub 1 and we'll jump right to it. All right, what else could we jump to in here? We could do something in the directory. So D will be all the headings in this current directory, and this will show you, here we have all of these files that are stored in this directory. We could jump right to it. So this is this concept I've been working on in search, that you want to limit the scope of what you're searching, and so that's what these different functions are for, is to limit the scope to jump to a heading is in a file, or is in a directory, or is in a project, for example, or that is in the agenda. Let's see if K probably, yeah, so K does work on this one. So here are two links that we could choose to jump to, and then there's one more thing in here to look at source blocks. Let's see if that works. Plus 3, 3. So let's say I have this. I could say jump and then press 3 and it should give me a way to jump to one of the source blocks that are visible here. So that's another kind of way of limiting the scope, that you're not just searching for a word, but you're searching for something that that's very specific. All right, so this is again the scimax jump body. That's just the hydra that opens to this, and maybe we could take a look at how some of these functions are implemented. So the jump menu is here. It's just a regular hydra. I make it blue because normally it doesn't make a lot of sense to make it red where you can keep doing things. And some of these just open other hydras, and others are just calling specific commands. So I'm going to look at the AV commands here. Let's look at this one. These are all really, really simple. They use AV, which is a great package, and all of them kind of have this pattern. So we have AV with, and you give it some name, and then AV process is what does all the work. And basically AV process takes a list of positions here and puts those overlays on it. So to give you a sense for like how simple this is, let's make a new way to jump that will say jump to table cells. So let me make a little table here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And say we want to be able to jump to one of these cells conveniently. So again, what we need is AV process with a list of positions. All right, so if I had this list, actually we're just going to delete this because this is all you actually need. AV process and a list of positions, and it will put the tree on. So the question might be, how do we get a list of positions of these cells? And here I'm going to build on a lot of experience I have with org mode programming. Let's put our cursor here and type metaxore. This is a program I wrote for inspecting what happens in org files. So with my cursor here, this tells me what I need to know about the place where this position is. So it says I'm in a table, and it tells me a bunch of things I can do at that table. That's not the interesting part. What I want to see is how org mode sees the element at point. So it tells me that I'm in a table cell, and most org elements have a begin here, and this number is the character position. So to get the list of positions, all we do is map over the elements. So let's do org element map, and we'll parse the buffer, and we're going to get a table cell, and then for each element, for each table cell, we're going to run this function. So let's do lambda table cell org element property. I don't know why that's happening. Org element property, let's get the begin, and we'll get that from the table cell. And the way org element map works is it's going to accumulate the list of positions. So I'm expecting 1, 2, 3, 9 numbers, and got a little too ambitious in nesting here. And there they are. So these are the 9 character positions that are in each one of these cells, and all we have to do now is wrap this in AV process. And now when we run this, it should see some overlays up here, and we have actually 2 tables on this page, because this is recognized as a table 2. But let's say I want to go up here, I just press H, and there is the position. And this is something from org mode. Let's make the result silent. It doesn't like to insert nil as a result. Let's go over to the J here. That makes for an easy way to jump to a particular table cell. So this is how almost all of those programs work in the Hydra. It just generates a list of numbers by some method and then passes it to AV process. So let's go back to where that is. So for a sentence, for example, I have all of these wrapped in AV width so that you can specify some style in here, but basically the list of positions here is accumulated by making an empty variable p, and then we save excursion that just makes the point not move, go to the beginning of the window, make the beginning of the window a position, so we push point into p, and then as long as point is less than the maximum position, the window end, this just limits you to the visible region. Then we go forward a sentence and then backward a sentence. So forward a sentence goes to the next beginning of the sentence, and then we go backward to get to the point that we need. And that allows us to get to the beginning of each sentence. And then I reverse them because as you push them in, you get them in the reverse order that you want. And since we want to jump to the first, I want the letters to go in order, we always do that. Similar question for, or similar style for jump to paragraph. Here we're just going to the beginning and going forward paragraph, then backward paragraph, and pushing the point into our list, and then what gets returned in this little let statement is the reverse of p. Nothing more clever than that. Let's see, what else could we look at in here? Let's look at the org ones. So a lot of these, like line jump, is just using built-in AV commands. So built-in go to line above, go to line below. Here we had a couple of things. I wrote most of these. Let's look at those. All right. So here's how I do the jump to a heading. So this is jump to a heading in the current buffer. So again, we just go to the beginning of a buffer, and then while we search forward for this this heading, and I use this regular expression because it works apparently in eLisp too, then we just push the let's see, we're using strings here, so this is eventually using IV to select it, not AV. So what we're doing here is accumulating a list of candidates that are formatted to look the way we want. And let's see, if I run this, IV org jump to heading, this is going to now be headings that are in this particular eLisp file. So it works in eLisp and in org mode, which is pretty nice. So we can jump to places that are organized in here. All right, and then once we generate our candidates here, then we just use the IV read, and I love IV for completion because we can have an action. So again, when I think about search, I think about you have a query of what you want, you have a scope of where you want to look for it, and then you have an action of what you want to do when you get there. And so when we pick the candidate that we want, this action works to just open it. So here, since we're in the current buffer, we just have to go to the character. So maybe that's a point worth noting up here. The candidates are a string and a cons list that has position and match beginning. Not the only way you could do it, but that's the way this one is done. And so then we just store the previous position or current position and then go to the char and then expand it. To get something in your agenda, similar idea, we make a list here and then we loop for every file in org agenda files, and with the current buffer, search through them to find org heading regex, and then we can look for anything that we want in our agenda files. This one is a generic function here that will take a list of files and do the same thing. It just loops through the files and looks for the heading expressions, generates candidates, and does that. And then to look for a heading in the directory, this uses that generic file but puts in a function here to find all org files in the current directory. And in the project does the same thing but uses a function to find all of the org files in a project. And then this one is looking at anything in open buffers. So here we're just mapping over the buffer list. If it has a file that ends in org, we get all of the headlines. Here we have a way to jump to recent headlines. That is a file that is recently open. And it looks like I even have done something I forgot about here. So here we have a generic Ivy org jump. So let's see. This is going to jump to a location in the org file. The default is the first entry in scimax Ivy jump functions, and with the prefix arg you can choose the scope. Alright, so lots of ways to think about this. One is I have a big Hydra that I can navigate through. Another one is, let's look at this one, Ivy org jump. And if I just press enter on that, then we get the first one. But I can also do Control U, Ivy org jump, and then choose the scope like this. So if I pick directory, then I can choose from that. All right, let's see what else could be interesting in here. Those are all those. Let's look at jumping to source blocks. So here is a very similar. Here I use Ivy read to jump to a source block. All we do in this example is search for source blocks, and when we find one, we generate a list that has, let's see, the list is going to be a line number and the content of the source block, and then we use Ivy read. We can use this to jump to inline sources. So here we're going to do an org element map over the whole buffer, looking only at source blocks. And for each source block, we collect a list of these. I must have written this a long time ago. It looks like it's not actually necessary to do this push because the org element map will return the collection itself. But you can also do push and then use P like this. There's ways to jump to positions in blocks, so you can jump to a header, jump to the first line, and these are not these are not codes that I'm especially proud of, but they work really well. So the idea here is to jump to the first line in a source block. The easiest thing to do is to go into org edit special mode, go to the minimum point there, and then exit the special mode. Let me show you what that looks like. All right, so let's say I'm over here and I just want to get to the beginning. It turns out that what you can do is go into special mode or special edit mode, jump to the beginning, and then get out, and the cursor is where you left it. And so a lot of those functions actually do that. They quickly jump to this special edit mode, move the point to a convenient place, and then exit it. And that is not very elegant in my mind, but it's so easy and so easy to understand that that I just leave it here. So you can see this is how we get to the first line, to the end line. Jumping to the end is a little bit trickier because this is the end of the source block. But there are all ways that I think about jumping around. Let's see, where else? Where were we? In here, all the jump words, these are all AV commands. There are so many AV commands, and there are so many variations of them. There's no chance of remembering them for me most of the time, so I kind of document it in the Hydra. going to a symbol. This one is helpful, so let's see if I do AJ. Let's jump to a symbol here. There's lots of ways to do symbols, so you can jump to a symbol above or below, but let's just press Y again, and now we have to start typing a word. So if I type A, these are all the symbols that start with A, and you can choose which one you want. Let's do go to AV go to word one above, so we start with K, and then here we press A. So the whole point of this is to be able to jump around where you want, and in things like Lispy, even you can press Q at the beginning of a S expression, and it will give you places to jump in the S expression like this. So you can use it a lot for navigation, and it's super great. All right, so I think that's the end of what I thought would be interesting to talk about in terms of being able to jump around. And these are not things that I use all of every time, but when I know about them and have this easy access to the Hydra menu, it's easy enough to figure out how to jump to different things. And I find it pretty helpful to be able to do that. Let's see, I think that's it. So thanks for coming, and I guess we'll see in a few minutes if this actually streamed to YouTube and Twitch today, and if it did, whether it was a good idea or not. All right, thanks for coming, and I'll see you next time.